Okay, hello everybody. Good. So I'm Chris Owen from TATA Steel Tubes. I'm Customer Technical Services Manager, and I'm going to take this opportunity to talk about pipework specifications and obviously to explain a little bit more about sustainability and the specifications for sustainability. For those who have dealt with me in the past, know that I'm quite a technical person and I try to focus a little bit too much on the detail. So I've tried really hard to make it very high level. There's a little bit more information in the pack than perhaps maybe I should have done, but the idea is it just gives you more background information because I think the packs will be circulated afterwards. Questions at the end, feel free to ask anything as we go along at the end of the presentation. And again, it's just really to give you an overview of pipework specifications, okay? So, a lot of people have probably been aware that we've had quite a lot of discussions of late in terms of pipework, hot, cold, warm. As we know from carbon steel tubes, there's different ways of manufacturing the product, and this can have an effect on how that product complies with legislation and how that complies in terms of end client specifications for performance requirements. The reason why I'm touching on the compliance information is it's sort of a start of a little journey which I'm going to take you through in terms of what happened in the market when we talked about carbon steel tube and hot versus cold, and how some of the standards which the industry makes reference to are not perhaps maybe as robust as what's needed to clearly define what you're getting. And sustainability adds another level of complication because unfortunately there isn't a particular single standard which says if you procure this tube to this standard, then it's going to tick your box in terms of technical requirements and sustainability requirements. So unfortunately, at the moment, if you want to specify something which meets all the different elements which you might want to satisfy on a project, you have to multi-certify or make reference to more than one specification. Now that causes a lot of confusion, and also, again, it's a pain in the backside because ideally you want to just have one standard or one reference which says, I know what I'm going to get. Unfortunately, standards are at the situation where they're not really being developed correctly, and that's resulted in lots of different conflicting requirements. And we saw that when we had the hot versus cold discussions in the market. People didn't realise what they were getting. They thought they specified something, and unfortunately, different products were being supplied. When it comes to sustainability, there's so many different ways somebody can say their product is sustainable. Some of it might be correct, some of it may not be correct. So again, this presentation is to try and just explain a few things which, if you're looking out for these specifications, hopefully they try and mitigate the risks. So TATA Steel is obviously heavily involved in sustainability. You know, we manufacture in the UK, we make our steel in Wales, we have 2 production sites for tubes at Corby and Hartlepool. You know, we are heavy engineering, okay? So sustainability is something which we are extremely interested in because obviously as part of our production processes, we do make a lot of CO2, okay? We have various strategies which are underway to reduce those CO2s, but again, one of the issues is that we use a lot of energy, a lot of heat treatment in the manufacturing of our products. And the reason why we use that heat treatment is that the technical standards which we manufacture to, the only way we can comply with those standards is by going through a hot process route. Now I know that there's other alternatives such as cold form tube, and people might say, yeah, but a cold form tube doesn't need to use all that heat, so it must be environmentally friendly. But cold form tubes don't comply with some of the legislation which is needed to show that they're suitable for the particular applications they're being installed with. So a tube, a carbon steel tube, can be manufactured in a variety of different ways to give it a variety of different performance requirements. The issue is that all these are hot finish process routes, so we have to use heat, we have to use energy. The reason why we have to use a hot finished product is when you start looking at the building services applications, and they do vary, you look at a different range of temperatures, the different range of pressures. Cold form tube can't satisfy those requirements because of the standard which they've been made to. Only a hot finished tube is suitable to be used for elevated temperature use and also for extreme low temperature use. So because of the requirements in building services varying from such a high temperature to such a low temperature and the pressure differences, we manufacture through a hot process route, and that obviously results in increased CO2. Okay. However, what we've seen is that a legacy of using old outdated specifications means that 9 times out of 10, when a job is being inspected, there is a risk that the wrong product is being installed. Now, that has a huge implication in terms of compliance, but now it's going to have a huge implication in terms of sustainability, because if you're trying to work on a project which has a CO2 reduction strategy and you're specifying a certain manufacturer or a certain product and your specification is vague, it's not correct, it's very open to interpretation, then not only technically we have the wrong tube, which may not be suitable for the right temperatures or the right pressures, but any sustainability benefits you thought you were getting as a result of working with a particular manufacturer are lost. And anything which the manufacturer such as Tata Steel does in terms of an embodied carbon reduction or an inset strategy, which gives you a certificate which says we can offset or inset some of that CO2 footprint, that's all irrelevant because you've put somebody else's product in and they're not transferable. So this is why we're trying to say it's very important to understand that different tubes are manufactured in different ways. They have different process routes, which can be basically seen as being more environmentally friendly, but they're not technically the right products for the market applications you're using. We know from some of the discussions which we've had in the market over the last couple of years that, the detail in terms of specifying a tube does get lost. So one of the challenges I've always had working with end users and specifiers is defining the correct technical specification. And we can do that now by clearly showing what we call quality designations. We identify that some of the standards are not robust, so what we're trying to do through the trade associations is now develop the next generation of pipework standards. And that will help define and make things a lot easier to understand. But in terms of the manufacturing process, we still can't get away from the fact that to make a product to the standard which meets your requirements in building services, we are having to employ a hot finish process route. Okay? So cold form tube is basically made the same way as hot, but then we take that tube and we put it through the furnace. That obviously at the moment takes an awful lot of energy. We are currently using gas furnaces to heat our tubes up, but we're actually moving to electrification. So we're moving to using induction furnaces, which are obviously more environmentally friendly. So again, we're already embarked on a strategy to reduce our CO2. But again, the thing which we see in the market is people saying, but my pipework specification is just asking for BS 1387. It's like, brilliant, that was withdrawn 15 years ago. You know? So you need to make sure you're referring to the right specification. Yeah, but cold form is more environmentally friendly. Well, no, because it doesn't comply, and actually most of your cold form is probably being imported from Turkey. So the legislation which they're dealing with in terms of manufacturing, health and safety, ethics might be different. So, again, we want to try and make sure that people understand that, yes, look, all tubes may look the same, and it's amazing how you think this guy can talk about a steel straw for hours, but those who know me know I can. But actually, they're not the same. They're all very different, and it's down to how you use the steel in the production, how you've actually done the conversion from the coil into the tube, and what other things you've done as part of that tube making process, including where you're dispatching it from, all have a new key focus in terms of this sustainability journey which we're all now embarking on. So what I'm going to do now is just literally go through what we're doing as part of our manufacturing processes to try and address some of these issues, and then try to sort of explain as a manufacturer, these are the other specifications which we're working to, which are now the relevant specifications which need to be in the client's documentation to ensure that not only they're getting the tube, which technically is the right tube for their application, but actually those sustainability benefits are being realized or can be validated. So if someone challenges you, you could say it's not a problem because we've got this, we've got this, we've got this, and these are all being verified. So one of the advantages which we've got as Tata is we make the steel ourselves. So that steel is made in Wales, it's made at Port Talbot. We have what we call an integrated supply chain, so we're not bringing material in from elsewhere. And now one of the issues at the moment when you talk about sustainability is when you start asking people, well, where have you got your steel from? There is a risk that you're getting steel which is being made parts of the world where sustainability just isn't even being addressed. Or at the moment, because of the sanctions, you've got a risk that what we call melt and pour. You might have somebody who's using coil from the open market. It could be Russian material. And again, it gets into the supply chain without people realizing it. So one of the advantages of having an integrated supply chain is we make the steel, we control the steel, but more importantly, we know exactly what's happening in terms of the energy which is being used for that steel. Okay? So when we have a sustainability reduction plan, we know where we're starting from. If you go to somebody who's manufacturing or buying open coil from the market and they're in another country and you say to them, what are you doing about sustainability? When they don't even know where they're getting the coil from, it's going to be very difficult for them to say, actually, we can give you this, we've got this, we know this is the embodied CO2 reduction program which our supplier is following. Some can, some can't. But in terms of carbon steel, we know that there's lots of different options out there for where that steel could come from, and what we try to say is the benefit of using TATA is we're controlling that. The other benefit which we've got is, again, as TATA Steel, we support the circular economy. So a lot of other speakers have made reference to circular economy. So basically everything which we make in terms of the steel tube can basically be reused again, gets recycled. It can either be reused in terms of reuse, so a product can actually be demounted, reinstalled elsewhere, or literally, if it's going to be scrapped, then basically it goes back into the melting pot. So we can take anything, reuse it over and over and over again. In fact, in part of our manufacturing process, we already use a percentage of recycled content. Somebody says, well, what is your percentage? We'll give them the value, and they say, but can't you go higher? We can, but we don't. And the reason for that at the moment is we are making virgin steel. So again, having a recycled content as a figure to quote against people is a little bit misleading, because as a result of making virgin steel, we maybe use 20% of recycled steel, and then we're using natural ingredients to control the final mechanical properties. We're the start of this journey. Once that tube is made, then it can go through the recycle process over and over again. Some of it comes back to us, some of it goes into other applications, recycled for other materials. We are looking at part of our strategy to maybe move to electric arc, and I'll touch on that later. That would allow us to have a higher percentage of recycled steel, but it needs to be a different type of recycled steel. We need to understand where it's come from, its mechanical properties. So again, that goes back to the importance of technical standards and specifications. They're going to have to get tighter. As people use more and more steel over and over and over again, the different types of steel will have to be more controlled, so it's more suitable for being recycled into more higher valued products. This is the current process which we have at Port Talbot. We take our raw materials and we use blast furnaces, so we use a lot of energy. We're doing activities to offset that, and there's various huge benefits which have been made by the way we actually run our blast furnaces, how we capture the gases, what we do in terms of our sort of hot mill strip formation. You know, this is something which has been on our radar for many years, stroke decades. Yes, sustainability is driving it, but actually good business sense is driving it. If we can make our processes more efficient and more cost effective, then obviously our products to our customers are more cost effective. And in this ever competing, challenging world which we're in, we always want to make sure that we're seen as having the best product, but more importantly, we understand the sensitivity of the pricing structures. So again, by us streamlining our processes, not only are we giving you the product which meets your requirements in full, gives you all those other technical guarantees, but the sustainability message is there because we are doing it as standard. But again, the timeline has sort of almost been accelerated. Over the last sort of couple of years, sustainability is becoming more and more of a key feature for end clients when they're doing their project specifications. And now we see more and more people saying, right, we're interested in using your product, but you need to fill in this form. Actually, it's not a form, it's forms. We need you to put all this information on about what you're doing, your manufacturing, where it's coming from, how it's being transported, what your embodied carbon is. You know, if you've got a guy called Sid, what does he do on Tuesday nights? You know, it's getting beyond the joke. We're saying, actually, look, all these different requirements can be easily demonstrated by making reference to relevant standards. And they're not pipework standards, they're manufacturing standards and environmental standards. So my objective today is just to take you through some of them, which then starts hopefully becoming more and more of a requirement. So when you start seeing people ask for fittings or pipework, they'll say, actually, as well as BSEN 10255, 10217, I want these other standards to be referenced or a statement that you comply with them. And that then shows that you're embarking on the sustainability journey. And sustainability doesn't just mean, oh, look, we've planted a tree somewhere, we're on a green journey. No, sustainability is actually having a robust strategy to get your manufacturing to where it needs to be to support that sustainable future. So Responsible sourcing, BES 6001. That's one of the key things which we promote into the industry. Put your hands up if you've ever heard of it. 2 people. Yeah. So anybody who's making anything using raw materials needs to demonstrate that they are taking that raw material responsibly and there's something which is in place to offset and address, I won't say damage, but to basically compensate or look at ensuring that we're doing it properly. And steel uses raw materials from the open ground, but obviously, doing it in a responsible, controlled way is still fine. So BES 6001 has been set up to allow independent assessors to come in and assess your whole process to ensure that you've got the correct management of your facilities around the use of your raw materials, so you're not wasting material, that the way you're actually extracting that material from the original sources is all in a controlled and responsible way. So you're not just going out there and damaging the environment. Mining happens. Raw materials from the earth, be it what's required for the steel making and what's required for other materials, it's happening. It can be done in a controlled way, and any impact of that can be offset by doing a BES 6001 approach to responsible sourcing and being part of responsible steel, for example. Then obviously you're able to demonstrate that you are doing that. So again, as a end user who wants to know, right, great that they've got glossy brochure, great that they're telling me that it'll meet the pressure, but how do I know there is something there which is actually sustainable? First, BES 6001. Second, we then have a load of other things which manufacturers can volunteer for, okay? But the problem is, when you volunteer for something, you need to be able to justify it or defend it. And this is where, again, I've highlighted that there's certain things which we can do in terms of environmental and product statements which have a third-party validation. ISO EN 15804, Environmental Product Declaration, EPDs. So this is where, again, if you as a manufacturer have this specification in place, when somebody wants to say, what's your embodied carbon for your product, you give them an approved, validated EPD. It shows it's been done properly. The assessment's done. It's not just a number which has been copied from somebody else's website. It's actually gone through a proper validated process. So things like emission trading standard schemes is vetted. So if somebody is part of that, then the data which they're supplying or the information they're giving the end user has been validated independently, okay? Other things are voluntary, no external validation. So again, there is a concern that someone's just presenting you with numbers. So that's why we're saying, actually, you really want to focus on the things which have to go through a process, have to have somebody come in and assess it, have to be to a standard, so then you clearly demonstrated, that's another tick in the box. When it comes to supplier and vendor questionnaires, and this is the documents and forms which you see from multiple people, all slightly different, all asking the similar sort of questions. Again, there's things which we can do, but again, we've sort of demonstrated, actually, they need to be validated. So there's a number of organizations where if you go through those processes, you're then able to basically ensure that the information, the data, you can be challenged on it, but you're able to say, no, it's been independently assessed. So an EPD, for example, has gone through that assessment. So when people talk about embodied carbon or look at your life cycle statements, it's not just, oh, we've got a life cycle statement. Actually, no, it's part of a standard. It's been independently assessed. It's been validated. It's worth the paper it's written on, okay? The next challenge is we have the standards in place. We have the documentation which has validated the claims or the statements which are being made by us as a manufacturer, but we have our own internal reduction strategies. And this is the part of the conversation where, as I said at the start of the presentation, there isn't a standard. We can't say, as TATA Steel, our CO2 reduction strategy is following BSEN ABC. The industry hasn't got that yet. It's starting to develop them, but at the moment what we have to do is develop our own and communicate our own strategies. So yes, we are reducing CO2. If you want more information about the details of that, then visit us on stand 9. But basically, what we're trying to do is identify the standards which we need to comply with. We've done that. identify the standards which are sustainability standards. So when people ask us what we're doing in terms of the information we're putting in the market, we can say, this is correct because it's done and been validated. If someone then says, yeah, but you're still, a heavy emitter of CO2. Yes, we are, but we are working towards a journey of reducing that. And at the moment, we've got a number of strategies which are taking CO2 out of our manufacturing processes almost on a daily basis. But for us, the biggest challenge is, and this might have come out of some of the discussions which people have had with me or some of the other conversations around the last couple of days, is Tata Steel is working very closely with the UK government. We need to understand where the UK government is going in terms of its strategy, in terms of an industrial strategy and its energy strategy. There's been obviously some reference in the news recently that the government's going to give steel industry some money. Okay, great, but we didn't really ask for that. What we asked for, obviously we'd like some money, who wouldn't? But what we asked for is clarification on where you're going with your industrial strategy and your energy strategy. Because we want to make investment, but we don't know whether it's going to be hydrogen, whether it's going to be offshore, energy renewables. So we are reducing as much as we can internally, and obviously we're looking at being carbon neutral steel by 2045. But when somebody says, well, how are you going to achieve that? Yes, we've got strategies. But at the moment, we've got multiple strategies because we don't know which way the government's going or the UK's going. If they go fully hydrogen, fine, we know what to invest in. If they're going to sort of partly hydrogen and obviously renewables, fine, we know what assets we need to invest in. So just putting some money towards steel industry is, well, thank you very much for the money, but actually what we really want is a more clear understanding of direction of travel. So that's why when we put our roadmap out of where we're going, we know where we have to get to. We know we've got different options to achieve that, but ideally, we're really waiting on the UK government to give us that final agreement of, right, this is what's going to happen in terms of the infrastructure, and then we can just get on with it. So, what can we do in the meantime whilst we've got all these other options which are being considered by the government? Okay, as I mentioned, as part of our sort of general manufacturing activities anyway, we are reducing CO2. And we're investing, and that CO2 is basically being used to bring down our overall embodied carbon, okay? But we've developed a scheme called Optimus, and this stands for basically zero emissions, zero port orbit emissions. What we're doing is we're doing not an offset scheme where we plant some trees somewhere and say, yeah, we've got a carbon strategy. It's called inset. So what we're doing is we are basically reducing our CO2 through engineering changes, investments internally, and that inset we can actually apply to particular products. Any money which we generate from those products as a result of us having the Carbon Optimus inset goes back into our manufacturing process to further reduce CO2. So we're not just basically saying we're sustainable, we've got a sustainable product to make sales, we're having the sustainable product to help then support more CO2 reduction activities. So offset is we can plant a tree somewhere and not have to do anything else. Inset is we have signed up and are bound by a continuous reduction of our CO2. So the more product we sell, the more CO2 reduction we are driving until we get, I say in terms of tubes, our plan is to be tube manufacturing carbon neutral by 2035. And this is where, again, when we start looking at, talked about the steel, now we're talking about the sort of conversion activities. Yep, we're already on with what we call our downstream operations, the tube sites, we're already on reducing those CO2s. And again, everybody will have their sort of own different strategies, but ours are all built around 4 elements. So again, reducing our carbon footprint of our sites, and that's being done by us downsizing our sites, improving our machinery, becoming more efficient, moving away from gas barrel furnaces for the heating, moving to electrification, radines, offsetting that electrification with solar, renewable energy sources, basically trying to become as environmentally friendly as we can. But there's other things which we can do as part of our manufacturing processes. We can make sure that, again, we can look at how our products and our services into the market, and I'll touch on this a little bit later. The design of the product has a big sustainability opportunity. Obviously, biodiversity is something which we're doing on our sites. And again, materials efficiency. So there's all these different things, and I won't go into the detail because there's a lot. And again, all you need to know really is Tata Steel is embarked on a journey. Other people are possibly going to copy us, because we tend to see when we do something in terms of carbon steel tube, everybody then seems to have exactly the same data or exactly the same statements. So unfortunately we lead, and we're happy to lead, but again, what we want to try and do is in a way so if we ever get challenged, we can validate it, we can demonstrate that we're doing it properly, okay? But as I said at the start of the talk, the biggest frustration is it'd be great if we can just say, yeah, the tubes to BSEN, ABC, and that covers your technical and your environmental. That's not there, but we're trying to basically push that through the standards and through the trades associations. So again, at the moment, you've got legacy standards. We're trying to promote the technical standards. We know that people are going to say, yeah, but hold on, a cold form tube is going to be more environmentally friendly. No, we're back to the compliance again. You can't have a cold form tube because technically it doesn't meet your requirements in full. So we have to have hot. The hot's there because of the improved performance, because of the application suitability, but hot does come with a higher CO2. Therefore, where's our strategy for reducing the CO2 and reducing that impact of carbon? So to try and sort of wrap up, we already know, and we've spent a lot of time with BSS over the last sort of couple of years talking about compliance. It's actually quite nice to not talk about compliance anymore, talk about a different subject, sustainability. But the sustainability is a little bit more of a harder subject to get across, because what do you mean by sustainability? How will you demonstrate you're doing something in a sustainable way? What we're saying now is really the industry needs to start making reference to additional standards. So for pipework specifications on carbon steel, for example, if they're specifying TATA, great. But if they can't specify us by brand, obviously got the quality designations in the standard, but actually ask, have you got 6001? Have you got the EPD standards? Are you signed up for the EU emissions training scheme? Have you got the local market and manufacturers approvals? And they include, ISO 9001, quality management system, 14001, the environmental management system. If you've got somebody who's supplying a product and they haven't even got that, then how can they really say that they've got the right product for your application? So it's almost like an extension of our compliance journey. Yes, we've now got from stop calling it 1387 to now calling it the right product. But now we just bolted on a few more other standards to make sure that when that technical specification comes in, yes, they want something which is both compliant in terms of the technical requirements and on the sustainability journey. The other things we also get asked for and we see is ethical behaviour, anti-slavery. That's becoming, again, more and more of a requirement. So again, that's all included within the sort of statements which we're putting out. One of the things which we did recently with another client was, again, journey miles. They wanted to know, well, where's your steel coming from? Wales. Well, where's it being made? Corby. How's it being distributed? Crosspoint. Well, where's that? It's about 12 miles from where you want the tube delivered to. Brilliant. So again, carbon miles is something, again, I think it's to be mindful of. But again, there's no specification in place. But people will start asking, and people will start basically, again, if it comes down to competition and people saying, well, actually, what's the... technically, we're supplying it from this place here, but not disclosing the fact that it's come from UAE or Turkey. So again, it's making sure clear transparency and actually the right information which is being disclosed is the correct information. The other thing is, I mentioned about design. We tend to have a very, we have a good product, a good robust product. So not that we're always over-engineering, but there's a good high factor of safety. However, when you look at most of the application it's being used in, there's a lot of opportunity to maybe go from heavyweight to medium weight. Because of the steel which we make and our manufacturing processes, we're not going to lose pressure integrity, we're not going to lose service life. So by taking that mass out and taking the steel out, you're actually doing a CO2 reduction. So there's an opportunity to sell a slightly lighter, cheaper tube, which is actually more sustainable. And we can do that by going to thinner walls and stronger grades of steel. So design of the actual product for its end application is quite important. Other little things like screwed and socketed. We make a tube which is screwed and socketed. We know half the market thinks the socket on the end of the tube is a thread protector, which it isn't because it's only on one end. The other half of the market says we don't want taper parallel, we want taper, so throw it away. So we go through the motion of having a tube made manufacturing it, added value for it basically to end up in a bin. So different jointing technologies or different systems, and if we're not putting the sockets on, that's more socket sales from BSS anyway. So that, again, another little thing which has quite a big impact on the sustainability journey, a CO2 reduction. Reuse of products. We were in a job in London recently where basically big hole in the ground, big train station, can't mention it, but we all know what's going on. And they were basically putting lots of pipe work in for what was going to be temporary platforms. And then they were going to basically have to set up another platform. And we're like, well, what are you going to do with the pipe? Well, we'll have to reorder it. And it's like, but this has only been in use for 2 years. Reuse it. It's all a demountable system. And they say, oh yeah, but how do we know it's okay? Come back to TATA. If it's a TATA product, we do it on data centers. Sometimes they can't get the old tube out. So they send us a sample, ask us to inspect it, we analyze it. Because of the steels we've used and the product which we've got, it hasn't actually lost any of its wall thickness. It's been installed correctly, maintained correctly, monitored correctly, so after 20 years, it's fine. Certify it, you can reuse it. So again, designing with reusing, again, another sustainable opportunity. And then finally, we're talking about the option of the carbon light. So we can look at putting the inset on it to have a more sustainable solution in terms of a carbon steel tube with all these other benefits. So, covered a lot, but I tried to take you from a little journey. We started off with compliance, standards and specifications are a bit of a mess. We've defined all that, but the next challenge is sustainability. There isn't a magic standard to turn to, but there's some other standards which we can refer to or people can ask for, which actually start to get you onto the right product or the right sustainable journey. Then we've talked about other things which we can do in terms of the design of the product, the way we could not downsize as such, but resize and go to thinner, stronger gauges to be able to have weight savings, which is a CO2 reduction, reuse strategies, other little things which overall give a good amount of CO2 reduction as part of a decarb strategy. And this is what we're really trying to do. So our messages into the market now are trying to be quite more simplistic because it's very easy to get bogged down into the detail about sustainability. Yes, the detail is required, but actually at a higher level, when really having the initial discussions, it's like, look, you want to make sure that whatever product you're looking at, there's certain guarantees in place. And that's about the performance of the product. Is it always going to do what you want it to do? Then obviously you've got the compliance. At the end of the day, you need to make sure that once you've installed it, regardless of your sustainability, is it compliant? Is it going to be suitable and fit for purpose? And does it tick the right boxes in terms of construction products regulations or pressure equipment directive? And then obviously you're into the sustainability. What have you got? Low carbon steel, great. We can basically look at our CO2 reduction strategies. Short UK supply legs, yes, we've got those because we make in the UK and we distribute through the UK. Change of designs, we've talked about that. That comes in the support. We can do technical work with the end users to take out mass, to give you higher grades of steel with less weight. And then technically we've got all the other sustainability messages, but we're saying actually there's key standards in place. As long as you're referring to those, you are actually reducing the risk of something coming into your project which claims to be something, but actually it isn't, or no one can validate it when you get asked to prove the point. So I'm conscious that there's lots of nodding heads, which is good, so people have understood what I've said. No one's fallen asleep, but mind you, you've got headsets on, you'll all be listening to like some sort of disco music or something. But anyway, if anybody's got any questions, again, ask now, or come to us on stand 9 where we can give you some more information. But hopefully this gives you a bit of an insight to A, what TATA's doing to try and support the industry, and B, some of the specifications which now need to be asked for or looked out for in terms of that sustainability journey. Okay, thank you.